What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, aka Lisa Ann's pool boy, and today we are going to get into my must start and my must sit wide receivers. Now, I just want to remind you guys, no one out here is batting 1,000. I'm not out here giving you guys perfect picks. Football is played on a probabilistic curve, man. So it's impossible to get every single thing right. I'm just trying to, shoot my shot and pick my places where I think, has a good range of outcomes where that event can pay off. And anyone out here that is claiming that they are 100% with their picks every single week are selling you guys fool's gold, doing a little Wizard of Oz behind the curtains kind of act around here. Now, I'm going to get into these in a second. Make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like. We post daily fantasy football content to help you guys win your fantasy football championships. Now, without further ado, let's go.
Thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm critical. My nitty bag.
All right, now I also want to let you guys know, man, I see all the comments. Everyone's asking me the start sit questions, all that. So I try and put out these videos to cover, a bunch of players that are maybe in your lineups or on your teams to give you guys a better feel of what I like in terms of my plays. But there's simply not enough time in the day for me to go around and answer every single start sit questions in my DMs, in my Discord DMs, in the YouTube comments, all of the above. There's not enough time in the day for me to do video outline, record, edit, then go on to then on Patreon, I write an article. I do rankings twice a week. I also deliver 2 to 3 nights a week doing DoorDash. I have a lot of things going on, so it's hard to get to every single one. So if you want to be prioritized, if you want to know exactly what I would do for my start sits, I come out with weekly rankings every single week for the Patreon, $5. That's all it is. It's right here. And it'll be down below in the comments. Now, when I don't answer you in the comments, it's not because I don't love you guys and I don't appreciate you guys. It's because if I truly feel like if I answer one start sit question, I have to answer all of them. But if you ask me a personal question, you ask me, how's my day going? How have you been? Stuff like that. I will pretty much answer almost every non-related football question. Also, I would like to have some free time. It's tough. It's not every second of my day can be spent doing start sit questions and football stuff because that would burn me out. And then I wouldn't be happy. This wouldn't be fun anymore. And then I don't know. Now, moving on, let's get into our must start wide receivers. And first up, I want to talk about the Steelers wide receivers versus Seattle Seahawks. Now, things might get sweaty in here. I might get a little bit wet in the hair. I did just come out the shower. It's steamy down here. Turn the fan off. It's actually pretty hot in New Jersey today for whatever reason. And we're going to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receivers. Now, we have Chase Claypool down there, but we're really talking about Claypool and Diontae Johnson. And I've been talking all week about this wide receiver core, and it's sad, man, because I love Juju Smith-Schuster. I know he gets a lot of shit for the TikTok stuff, but Juju deep down inside is a really, really nice guy. Comes from Hawaii. I think he had some kind of like humble beginnings type of stuff. The TikTok stuff doesn't bother me as much as it does with everybody else. I just know he's a good guy. Like just that one play where he stood up for Antonio Brown or whatever, came across, laid out Vontaze Burfict. I think that it just speaks a lot to who Juju is. He also had like a speech today at his like fundraiser foundation thing where he like was pretty much crying because it really does suck to have a season-ending injury on a 1-year deal with the Steelers because now he's going to be a free agent in the offseason. He's not going to be able to sign another long-term deal because he's not going to be worth the same amount if he was coming off of a healthy season, a good season, all that. So it's really tough to see with Juju. But on the back end of that, frees up a lot of targets for Chase Claypool and Diontae Johnson, but more so Chase Claypool. Now, I'm not a big believer in vacated targets, or I know people aren't believers in vacated targets, and that's true, right? Because let's say Juju goes. James Washington doesn't all of a sudden get 1 million targets. He doesn't get all of the targets from Juju. But if you get Claypool, right, and you knock up his routes run, because usually he wasn't out there in 2 wide receiver sets, only in 3 wide receiver sets. You put him out there in 2 wide receiver sets, his target per route run carries over, and now if his routes and his snaps go up, so do his targets. And he's now been in 2 games this year. This is a blurb from Dwayne McFarland in his utilization report. I referenced this pretty much all week long. And Chase Claypool has had in games he had 1 game without Juju and 1 game without Diontae Johnson. He has had a 26% target share, a 25% target share, and he has been the wide receiver 17 and the wide receiver 11 in those weeks. He is a back-end wide receiver 2 for me rest of season. And they have the perfect matchup this week. The Seahawks secondary is scary awful. They have a bottom 5 passing defense in DVOA. They just cut one of their corners, and they're giving up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. So I think Claypool and Diontae, I think Diontae Johnson is a borderline wide receiver 1 play this week, and I think that Claypool is pretty much a firm wide receiver 2 for this week. Now, moving on from that, we're going to get into Courtland Sutton at home against the Las Vegas Raiders. Kind of a weird game with the John Gruden stuff going on, to be real with you guys. I don't know if that really factors into the game at all, but I really like the way that Sutton has looked with Judy out of the lineup. He was the wide receiver 10 on the week last week against the Steelers in PPR. He had 7 catches, 120 yards, a touchdown on a 30% target share. And I love this matchup because he's going to be going up against Amik Robertson is his name, right? And he's operating as this true alpha in the offense. Courtland Sutton has a top 12 weekly ceiling. And this guy, Amik Robertson, PFF has him projected to be an excellent matchup for Courtland Sutton. He's going to be playing him the most amount of snaps against Courtland Sutton. He's going to be maybe shadowing him a little bit, and that's what we want because Courtland Sutton is 6'3", 218 pounds. This guy, Amik Robertson, who's scheduled to kind of play a lot of snaps against Courtland Sutton, is 5'8", 187 pounds. So Sutton is going to absolutely baby this kid. I think the Raiders are going to be in a weird funk with this John Gruden stuff going on. So I think that Sutton is in play to be a wide receiver 2 this week. And this week we're not really covering the studs at wide receiver. I kind of wanted to get a little bit fringier, so we're kind of talking about like wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 plays here. And the next one I wanted to bring up was Odell Beckham. And I know that he hasn't been great. I know that he's been 3 weeks back from injury. OBJ has finished as the wide receiver 30, the wide receiver 78, and the wide receiver 81 in PPR. And I get the disappointment, but we have to remember he's recovering from injury, where not only is that, affecting his performance, but, he's got to get on the same page with Baker. I think that there was a route where it was like a scissor concept, and he ran a post. Safety bit on the corner, I believe, and Baker had him on a free shot deep and just didn't throw it. He also, I think in like week 4, he missed OBJ a bunch of times going deep. So I really do think that OBJ still is fine, is still a great wide receiver. Now, when I mean great, I don't mean like top 5 like he used to be, but I think that he's still a, fringe top 15 talent at wide receiver. Maybe fringe 20. Maybe I'm telling on myself a little bit with my OBJ love here, but I love this matchup against the Cardinals this week because I think it's a perfect get-right spot for him after, everyone has given up on him. This just feels like the perfect time where everyone has given up on him. His props are starting to come down. His expectations are starting to come down. I think that his props on, wherever you can get him, FanDuel, DraftKings, if you want to play him on DFS, I think this is probably this just feels like a week where OBJ gets right, does something crazy. And this matchup isn't anything, too special. But I think OBJ has just been running cold, and I think the positive regression is going to be coming very soon. He's underperforming his points per game by 5.6, right? So he is averaging 7.6 points per game right now. His opportunity says that he should be in the 13.2 range, which would be, I want to say fringe wide receiver 2, but I could be wrong. But when you're expected to have a 13.2 points per game and you're only at a 7.6, something is bound to rebound. I think that he could, connect on one of these deep shots with Baker, nice little play action pass, get him deep. I think it's going to be a high scoring game where, they just went toe to toe with the Chargers. They're probably going to go toe to toe with the Cardinals, who have been scoring a lot recently as well. So I do like OBJ as, a top 30 type play at wide receiver this week. I wouldn't shy away from him just yet. Then we have a nice veteran on this list. We have Emmanuel Sanders at the Tennessee Titans. And we're getting fringy here, but I love Emmanuel Sanders this week. Sanders is currently the wide receiver 20 on the season in PPR, which is crazy to me. He wasn't really on my radar. Did I take him to stack with Josh Allen in like best ball leagues here and there? Yeah, but I wasn't targeting Emmanuel Sanders. I want to say he was on a lot of waivers in managed leagues. But he just put up 20.4 points against the Chiefs, and the Titans are allowing the 7th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. So I think that the Bills are going to roll into Tennessee, light them up. They pass over expectation. They pass the ball as much as they can until they're winning by so much to the point where they are forced to run the ball. But I think that they're going to light up the secondary. I want to say they have Janoris Jenkins out there, and it's nothing too great. And I like Sanders as like a top 30 play this week, maybe even like a fringe top 24 guy in this matchup. Then getting a little bit deeper, we're going to talk about the boy Jakobi Meyers. And I called that he was going to score a touchdown last week. It didn't look great. We're going back to the well on Jakobi Meyers. They're going to be at home against the Dallas Cowboys. And Jakobi Meyers was inches away from scoring a touchdown last week. Inches away. And I still like him this week against the Cowboys. And I know that everyone wants to say that the Cowboys have Trevon Diggs. And Trevon Diggs is amazing, man. He looks great. but he's projected to play the majority of his snaps on the outside, according to PFF. He's an outside corner, and Jakobi Meyers is a slot guy. So I think that Trevon Diggs is probably going to be out there shadowing, or not even shadowing, but just playing on the outside against Nelson Aguilar, some Kendrick Bourne, and Jakobi Meyers is scheduled to play the most amount of his snaps against Jordan Lewis. And Dallas is allowing the 10th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers because of the way they play. They're going to get up big. They're going to get up big to the point where you can no longer run the ball against the Cowboys. Who would have thought that the Cowboys would have like a sick defense at this point? We have Dan Quinn that's actually been looking pretty good. Trevon Diggs has been a revelation at this point. They got rid of Jalen Smith, the linebacker, but their defense has been great. And they're what we call a pass funnel, right? And I've been talking about this like the last 2 weeks. This is a chart by David Zach on Twitter, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger here. And what it pretty much does is it shows the percentage of yards allowed between, rushing and passing. And the Cowboys are the third biggest pass funnel because they get up big and they force teams to throw from behind. We saw that in the Eagles game. We saw that, I want to say last week. I can't remember who they played, but a lot of these teams have to come from behind and chase the Cowboys while they're from behind. This isn't going to be a game where the Patriots can just hand the ball off to Damian Harris, Brandon Bolden, whatever random running back they want to pull off the bench. This is going to be a game where they're going to have to pass. And because of that, because Trevon Diggs will be on the outside giving, Nelson Aguilar a tough time, I think that this is going to be a good game for the tight ends. I think this is going to be, so not tight ends, not Jonnu, but Hunter Henry and Jakobi Meyers from the inside. So I like Jakobi Meyers as a wide receiver 3 this week. Maybe, just maybe, our King will score a touchdown. Now we're going to move on to the Seattle wide receivers at Pittsburgh as my must-sit wide receivers. And you hate to see the Russ injury, man. You hate to see that. Like, came forward, smashed his finger. It was like, I don't know, man. The finger looked tough. It seemed like they had to put screws in it. They were saying he's going to be gone for 8 weeks. But as a Jets guy, don't get me wrong. I love Geno Smith. I think that he actually wasn't as bad as advertised. But you're asking a lot of Geno Smith because this is an offense with Shane Waldron. I was actually kind of wrong about Shane Waldron. I thought that he'd push the pace a little bit more. I thought that he would, pass the ball a little bit more. This is an offense that lived off of Russ's efficiency. They ranked 32nd in plays per game, so really bad tempo, and they ranked 29th in pass attempts per game. So this was a team that they weren't really getting up to the ball. They're not passing the ball a lot. And the only way that you're going to generate fantasy points in that environment is just from monster efficiency from Russ on really big plays. Now we're bringing Geno Smith into the equation in that environment. It's going to be extremely difficult for him to, hold up any of those wide receivers between DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. And I'm really skeptical of Geno Smith. I know that he actually looked pretty good against the Rams on Thursday night, but you're asking him to go in there against a top 5 defense in the Pittsburgh Steelers in a primetime game on, I want to say Sunday or Monday night. And I don't believe it because I think that he's going to probably get spooked by the Steelers. I have Metcalf as a fringe wide receiver 2 and Lockett as a fringe wide receiver 3. So they're not unstartable, but these are not the Seahawks wide receivers of weeks past. You have to kind of temper expectations on them. And if you can find somebody else to play, I'd be doing that. Then we have, moving on, Kadarius Toney, and a guy that everyone is really high on right now. You probably got him off waivers, probably excited to put him into lineups. Don't get me wrong, he looked great. He finished as the wide receiver 29. He finished as the wide receiver 4 the last 2 weeks, and he's been a stud. I think that Kadarius Toney has a really bright future ahead of him, but he has a lot working against him at this point. Daniel Jones had a concussion, a scary concussion. It seems like he might play this week, but he might not, which means you have to have a full game of Mike Glennon against the Los Angeles Rams. Then you have Sterling Shepard coming back from injury, so he's going to take some of those snaps and targets away. And they're playing the Rams, right? Like I said, that's going to be a really tough defense to go against. You're going to have Aaron Donald up front, and then you're also going to have Jalen Ramsey in the slot. And Kadarius Toney plays the majority of his snaps from the slot. So PFF has Jalen Ramsey's most projected snaps against Kadarius Toney. Kadarius Toney is going to be seeing a lot of Jalen Ramsey on Sunday. He has a poor matchup advantage against Jalen Ramsey, so he just has a lot going against him at this point. I just wouldn't be, he's a wide receiver 2 now because he's been a beast. For me, he's probably going to be a, upper tier wide receiver 4 on the week until, we kind of see some things. Now, if Daniel Jones comes back and he's healthy, maybe Sterling Shepard misses this game, you can fire him up as like a nice wide receiver 3. But I would temper expectations on Kadarius Toney for this week. And then another young wide receiver that instead of, has been doing amazing stuff, he's been extremely frustrating, is Laviska Shenault. And it's not even Laviska Shenault. It's not even Laviska Shenault's fault is the problem here. I hate Urban Meyer with a burning passion. I hate him. I don't understand how you can see what Laviska Shenault has done, man. He had that huge play against the Bengals on Thursday Night Football where he looked amazing. He had the huge play this week where he looked amazing. He turned in like a 20-yard catch and juked out like 4 people, ran it all the way down for like 58 yards. How do you get him just one touch in an offense where you no longer have DJ Chark and you have Jamal Agnew out there, Dan Arnold? I don't understand how you're giving these people more targets than Laviska Shenault. It feels like, I just think that he is all over the place as a coach and doesn't know what he's doing. Carlos Hyde gets way too many touches in this offense. There's no reason that James Robinson doesn't get more touches. I think that he just mismanages the entire offense. And there's a lot of coaches like this that don't, like, you need to be micromanaging who you're getting the ball when. Like, you can't lose a game, look at the post box score, and see, oh, we only got Laviska Shenault 3 targets. And even that, okay, so let's put my Laviska Shenault bias aside. How are you giving Tavon Austin, Dan Arnold, and Jamal Agnew as many targets, if not more, than apparently your wide receiver 1 in Marvin Jones? Right? You have to get your best players the ball in order to win these games. It just makes no sense. It's just lackadaisical coaching, not being, like, you need to be extremely aware of your personnel at all times when you're playing in the NFL. Like, it's not Ohio State where you can just go to the bench, oh, send Terry McLaurin in, oh, send Michael Thomas in. He's better than anybody that they can put out there at Northwestern. You know what I mean? It's a different environment. And it just feels like he doesn't care at all in terms of what personnel is out there. And the other problem is that now that DJ Chark is gone, Laviska Shenault's playing on the outside. So if it's going to be like this and they can't manufacture touches to him, 2 things are happening here. One, Urban Meyer is being an idiot and not, being more aware of getting him on the field. Because I want to say that he had the same amount of snaps as Jamal Agnew. He's not getting him more snaps. He's also not getting him more targets. And now with him being on the outside, it just seems like Urban Meyer isn't as interested as getting him the ball. I think that he kind of operates like in like a kind of like an east-west kind of offense where he's giving, people like screen touches and people in the slot. So now we have Laviska Shenault on the outside where Urban Meyer is kind of, out of sight, out of mind going on there. And then on top of that, Laviska Shenault's natural position is more in the slot right now. I think that eventually, 2-3 years down the line, he can be a dominant wide receiver on the outside. I think that's in his range of outcomes. That's what they did with DJ Moore. DJ Moore started in the slot, and then by year 3, year 4, he became a polished route runner on the outside. And when he's not as polished and not giving him as many touches, that's a bad recipe, especially against the Miami Dolphins, because I talk about them every single week, and they've actually been giving up a good amount of fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. But it's going to be extremely tough for a guy like Laviska Shenault, who's kind of newer to the outside wide receiver position, to go up against Xavier Howard and Byron Jones. He's a pretty raw wide receiver. I don't expect him to get open a bunch. I don't expect him to, manufacture him touches at all. So I think that this is going to be a spot where until we see a role change or we see our Urban Meyer start caring about who's on the field when and who's getting targets when, I think he's a wide receiver 4 at best until we see either a juicy matchup role change or Urban Meyer, maybe even gets fired. Then we have a more polished outside wide receiver, AJ Green in Cleveland, and AJ Green's role is kind of diminishing here. I'm not saying that he's like becoming dust. It's only a 1-week sample, but he's went from 18% of the target share to 21% to only 7% last week. We saw Rondale Moore trend up, get more targets, more routes last week, and that hurt both AJ Green and Christian Kirk. But I think that this is going to be a tough matchup for AJ Green as he's kind of getting, I wouldn't say phased out of the offense, but I think sooner rather than later, Rondale Moore and Christian Kirk will, earn their way in to more targets and more of AJ Green's opportunity. But AJ Green also has a tough matchup against the Browns this week, where he is projected to have a poor matchup against the Cleveland DBs, against Greedy Williams, against Denzel Ward on the outside. I don't think he pretty much needs to luck into a touchdown to pay off in fantasy. So for me this week, he is a wide receiver 4, and I'm not really playing any of the Cardinals wide receivers besides DeAndre Hopkins. Our last wide receiver is a man beloved by many, Mecole Hardman, as my last sit here. And I think people are going to be really optimistic with Mecole Hardman after last week, right? So he had 12 targets, he had 9 receptions. Both of those were career highs, and I think people are going to want to jump on that. But it was a weird game where they were in a really weird game script they're not always in. It was an extremely negative game script coming from behind the entire game. Tyreek Hill tweaked his knee late. And prior to that game, Hardman only saw 7 targets combined in his previous 2 games. So I don't think that he's going to just get throttled into a role where he gets more targets. I don't think that you lose a game. I don't think that you lose that game and go to the drawing board and say, you know what we needed to do? We needed to get Mecole Hardman more touches. There's no way. There's no way. It's we need to get Tyreek Hill more touches. We need to get Travis Kelce more touches. We need to play a more efficient offense. And I think he probably goes back to his limited role from the prior weeks. I probably have him as like a wide receiver 5 for the week. Now, that's going to do it for us today, fellas. As always, appreciate talking ball with you guys. Now, it's time for me, 4:40 p.m. on Thursday. So now I'm going to sit down from like now until kickoff, grind out these weekly rankings. I like to do these videos beforehand so I can kind of get a feel for, who I like as plays for the week and who I don't like. Now, with that being said, if you want access to those weekly rankings, again, only $5 on the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. It'll be in the description. It'll be down below in the comments. I love you guys. Good luck on your teams this week, in your matchups. Tomorrow we'll come out with, so what is today? Friday. Tomorrow we'll do a rest of season type video, and then Sunday will be a private Q&A live stream, start and sit live stream for the patrons. Now, with that being said, I love you guys. As always, I'll see you in the next one.